All right, folks, it is that time for interviews. We're going to be speaking with Manasi and Medha today. They both are involved with Women in Blockchain and She 256. These organizations are making waves inside the blockchain space, and they're doing awesome things to bring diversity and equality into blockchain, which is what we love to see here at CryptoLiveLeak and Block Relations. We're going to have the opportunity to be able to speak with both of them today, answer some questions that I have for them, and get really good insight into what they're doing and how they're changing the world, truly. And I look forward to talking to them. So let's get ready and let's go. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome Medha and Manasi here, some good friends of mine. I've met Manasi before at the MIT Bitcoin conference, and we're going to be highlighting Women in Blockchain and She 256 today. They are up to some awesome stuff, and we're going to dive right into it today. So how are you all doing, and what's new with you all?
Thank you for having us, Ben. This is super exciting, and we're very interested in sharing our experience in building that guide. We're doing great. How are you?
Excellent. Medha, how are you?
I'm great. Yeah, thank you so much for getting us on your podcast. This is awesome. Super stoked to be talking about the guide.
Right on. Well, you all did such an awesome job. So we're going to go right into that. Is you all made a beginner's guide for everything you need to know crypto blockchain, and it is so on point because like I was telling Medha before the show, I've shared it with like 10 other people who have asked me, what is crypto, how do I get started, what is blockchain? And I'm like, you know what, I have a perfect document for you all. So why don't you tell us a little bit, obviously, why did you do it, and how did you work on this, and how long did it take you guys to come up with something like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I guess I can speak to like why I really wanted to do this. And it's because every time I started talking about what I do or like what I spend 90% of my time on during the week, which is crypto, to someone else who wasn't in the crypto space, they were always like, wow, this sounds super interesting. Like, where do I get started? How do I start learning about this? And I felt like each time I was reinventing the wheel and like creating a new document with like maybe like old resources, and it was just getting out of hand. So I realized there needs to be like one place where all of this can exist and be updated. And then I talked to Manasi, and she shared very similar concerns. Maybe she can speak to her experience, but that's kind of how this idea came about.
Yeah, that's completely true. So we started Women in Blockchain in 2017, and since then it's been 2.5 years. But the most asked question is always, where do we get started, right? For beginners, the crypto space is kind of overwhelming with the resources out there, with the kind of things that are happening. So we had a resource from 2017, which was pretty old. It was dated. It was ready for an overhaul, and I'm super excited that Medha was interested in joining hands, and we worked on putting this together. It took us, I would say, a couple months, but I'm glad that it's out now, and thank you for sharing it as well. I'm glad it's helping people who want to learn about this space.
Yes, and obviously you all are trying to incorporate and bring in women into this field, and I absolutely love that because I see people making these efforts, and the blockchain space, in my opinion, needs this right now, especially while we're in these beginning phases. So why don't you talk to us a little bit more? What is She 256 up to, and Women in Blockchain, what have you guys been up to in regards to involvement in the community?
We've, along with the changing tides, we've gone virtual like everyone else has. We always did monthly meetups where we had speakers that we wanted to highlight, topics we wanted to discuss. So we've continued that. Nothing has stopped us from doing that, but it's just in a virtual format, which I think has positives as well, because now initially, we would do local meetups in Boston, and it would be restricted to people who are in the neighborhood. Now these meetups and conversations are just open to all, and we've had people join us from around the world as well. So I think that has been a positive in this, pandemic situation. And we continue to do more of those. So I think in the future, we want to have more hands-on workshop as well. Most of our previous formats has been speakers coming in, talking and educating our members about different topics. But we realize there's a need for more hands-on workshops and sessions. And that's something that we are planning in the future.
Awesome. Now, what is She 256, and when did this get started?
Yeah, for sure. So She 256 is a 501c3 nonprofit that started about 2 years ago. back when I was still in college. And it basically started around the idea that we truly believe that blockchain technology will change the governance and financial structures of the world. So we wanted to make sure, me and my co-founders, that the people building these systems were representative of like the diverse populations of the world, right? So this nonprofit is built around the mission of increasing diversity and breaking down barriers of entry to the blockchain space and like tech more broadly. So I guess when we first started, so my co-founders are Sarah and Alexis, and when we first started kind of getting into the space, it was maybe like late 2016, early 2017, like I just started college. And I realized like there were so many opportunities in the space, and I guess so much lack of awareness and education around all this. But then like, you know, the Bitcoin hype happened around 2017, and now it became like a normal household term, but I still feel like people didn't really know what it was, especially underrepresented minorities and women that weren't already in the tech space. And so that's something that I really wanted to change. And now going back to the guide, I feel like Monty said, there's like so many resources now, like now that it's 2020, I think like everyone has like a basic idea of like what Bitcoin is and what digital currencies are. But I think there's just so many resources now, it's almost hard to know like where to dive in. And there's also so many niches in the blockchain space. Like I feel like every day like a new niche pops up, and I want everyone to have an idea of each one so that they know where to dive in, you know. Like when I first started, like DeFi wasn't even a thing, and now it's like the thing I spend the most time on. So I think giving other people that opportunity was one of my main goals. And as for what She256 does, we do a couple different things. We're centered around like 3 principles, which are mentorship, education, and community. So we have a lot of events. Now they're like webinars, I guess, because of COVID. We also have like an online interview series where we interview super cool women that are doing groundbreaking work in the space. That's called Fireside Chats. We also have an educational initiative called Block Change, where we basically try to make educational content for high schoolers. Right now it's local, but we want to make it open source and spread it around the world. We also have a job board that we just launched. We're doing a future of blockchain survey / study where we're trying to scope out what diversity in the space currently looks like and how we can change it. So we really want to take like a data-driven approach there to our initiatives. So we're trying to gather a lot of data on where we're lacking as a space and where we can make the most impact. But yeah, those are just a couple of the things we're working on, but super excited to see what is going to come in the next couple of years.
That's so awesome. And I was able to attend a lot of webinars since COVID has started. And one of these reoccurring themes I'm hearing is bringing diversity to the space. And you all are doing that. And I think that's so smart that you're looking at the data behind it too, to figure out, hey, where do we start this and how do we get the ball rolling in that direction? And I think that's so awesome and very empowering to see people like yourself doing this work to make sure that we're bringing equality and diversity into the space, because I think that's how we build this future together and make it something where it can be incorporated throughout the world in governments and finance and all that kind of stuff. And one of the other things I notice is most universities are not offering a degree in blockchain or crypto. And it is so awesome that you're educating high school level students that are going to be moving into college where hopefully one day they can get a degree in this thing and they can have that baseline foundation of knowledge. So I think that's very powerful stuff. And I absolutely love what She256 and Women in Blockchain are both about. So hats off to you guys for doing an awesome job with that so far.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think in 2017, when I started learning about the space, I attended a lot of events and conferences, and I would be maybe 1 out of like 5 women in a room of like hundreds of people, and that was really jarring. I come from a finance and technology background, but I've seen inequality and the problems that it causes, and I was like, if we're gonna have an innovation as impactful as blockchain, we need to, from the beginning, have conversations around diversity and make initiatives and efforts. And I'm super excited with what She256 is doing and what we are doing, and taking that to the next level.
Awesome.
Yeah,
What
and
are some,
I
go ahead.
oh, sorry. Yeah,
No, go ahead.
I wanted to echo that, like, that idea. Like, I agree that in colleges, we're not like making it a focal point. I was really lucky. I went to Cal and we have like a very cool blockchain ecosystem. We had an organization called Blockchain at Berkeley, which is kind of how my career started. We also have like a blockchain accelerator, a couple of classes that students run, which is awesome. But I did realize that like I was really lucky that I was like in the Silicon Valley where a lot of these companies and projects were starting up. And I feel like being a part of that community meant that I feel like, I guess to preface that, like the blockchain space is super small. So I felt like any meetup I was going to or any conference, like I recognized a lot of people, which is a good feeling to have because you're like one of the first 1,000 people working on a really cool space. But it made me realize it's also super insular. Like, you know, we're reaching out to friends who are also in our own network, which breeds like a lack of diversity innately. So I think now we have to be much more outbound and start reaching people who are not already in our networks and not already in this space.
Yeah, great point. Now, what are some of the barriers, and this question's for both of you, what are some of the biggest barriers that you're seeing that women in blockchain and 256 are starting to kind of tear down?
But one of the main things is like, so I think blockchain is a niche in the tech space in general. And tech already, as we know, has been around for like 3-4 decades now and is super, super lacking in diversity. So that obviously spills over into blockchain, right? Because the main talent coming to the blockchain space is from traditional tech and traditional finance, which are both heavily like white male dominated. So that's one thing. I think the lack of women and underrepresented minorities in STEM and CS in general is definitely affecting the blockchain space. But I think where there's a cool opportunity there is that I think blockchain is so interdisciplinary that, first of all, we don't need to just be focusing on like programmers, right? I think anyone with any background can really find their niche here, like anyone with like econ or like poli-sci or marketing or honestly anything. There's a space for everyone in this field. And I think that's something that we really need to drive home to people because I think when they hear blockchain or Bitcoin, they think it's super foreign and scary. But I think if we can kind of democratize access to the education around blockchain and Bitcoin and what it is in its essence, I think a lot more people could rally behind it.
I think just adding to what Medha said, it's a narratives issue. And I think I've noticed that over the last few years. From an outsider's perspective, people mostly hear about speculation and prices and not as much, the focus isn't as much on utility and what this can actually enable. And I think that's where a lot of our education efforts are focused on, just educating people about the various use cases, the various ways blockchain has advantages even for our day-to-day experiences and how it can enable, you know, this new world that we talk about, but we haven't really seen in practice.
There's so many opportunities that we have to look at this through the lens of everybody, where it's one of those things where it isn't just the tech people or the finance people. And I think that's the really, really cool part about it is that we can welcome anybody. They could be an artist, they could be a business manager, they could be, you know, a developer, and everyone can be a part of this ecosystem. So it's awesome to see women in blockchain and She 256 having an impact on that. Now, what are some of the upcoming projects that you all are working on? I'm sure you guys are hosting virtual events like you mentioned. What are some of the things that you guys have upcoming?
So we just launched our job board beta. So that's going to be a 3-month trial where we've worked with a lot of cool crypto projects on kind of creating a space for people to be able to find these jobs. I think the most cool part about this is that since we're a diversity focused organization, we try our best to ensure that all the companies that we're working with are also actively working towards being more inclusive workplaces. So we don't just let like anyone be a partner. We have them kind of meet a set of loose guidelines, which include things like being an equal opportunity employer, include things like having inclusivity or like having inclusivity ingrained in their cultures and things like that. So we're really fortunate to be working with companies like Polychain Capital, My Crypto, Penn Blockchain Labs, a lot of cool VC firms as well as blockchain organizations and projects to be able to offer jobs to our community. And so, yeah, that's been going on for the past month. The pilot will end around September, and if we find that it's a really good resource to our community, we'll, you know, make it a full-time thing. We'll put more bandwidth towards it. The other thing is, like I mentioned, the Future of Blockchain survey. So the goal there is to really quantify the gap of women and underrepresented minorities in the blockchain space, and then outline how we can truly democratize the technology to include everyone. And then another thing is we launched a community platform. So we have an external Slack that I encourage everyone to join. And that's basically just a community where anyone can like ask questions, post about events, be an ally to our cause, things like that. We're also continuing fireside chats. So if anyone wants to be interviewed and be on our medium, that would be awesome. Just reach out to me. And yeah, we're still hosting a bunch of webinars as well. We just hosted one around Bitcoin and how to onboard into the Bitcoin ecosystem. We had another one with Zcash around how to care about privacy. And yeah, so excited to see more events around that. Yeah.
Awesome.
I think what Medha said definitely needs to be highlighted in terms of, these initiatives, Women in Blockchain, She256 are great and they're making a lot of impact, but true change won't happen till these organizations and companies within the space actually adopt these principles and actually follow them. And I think with the job board, that's a great initiative that you're not partnering with any company, you're partnering with companies who follow these rules. I think that's pretty critical and bringing a bigger change. As to us, we I think are more focused on partnering with similar causes, initiatives, so which are not in the blockchain space. So one example is Women Who Code. It's a worldwide organization with thousands and thousands of women engineers and non-engineers alike. We are actively partnering with them so that instead of bringing these individuals out of their comfort zone, we are trying to go towards them and educate them and try to expose them to what's out there in the blockchain space. So more such partnerships coming along. She Geeks Out is another one that we are actively partnering with.
Yeah,
Very
and one
cool.
other thing I want to add is that we're also really trying to kind of reflect on the past couple months that has like all the stuff that's been going on in America, like around Black Lives Matter and things like that. I think we really want to take a step back as an organization and re-outline our commitment to the Black community along with other underrepresented minorities. Because honestly, I don't think crypto as a space has done its part. And I hope that us as like a diversity focused initiative can kind of set the par and like reflect on where we've had shortcomings and change going forward based on all this new information. So that's something we're doing internally as a team, and hopefully will be reflected in our OKRs as an org over the next couple months.
Yeah. I have a question for both of you again, is as you all are trailblazing this path forward for diversity and equality within the space, how are you holding, or how should the industry hold companies accountable to making sure there is diversity or equality? Because it's one thing where a company can say, hey, we're an equal opportunity employer and we have XYZ slots filled for diversity, but how are we going to hold these companies accountable, whether it's a startup, a VC, a well-established company? What are your thoughts on that? I'll direct this to Monty.
Yeah, I think I'm really excited to see what comes out of that survey that She256 is doing. I think, we've over the last few years, we've said there isn't enough diversity, but there isn't good data either to say what exactly that means in terms of diversity. So very curious to hear from Medha as well, what she's seeing through those surveys. And once we have that data, I think we can make actionable items.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good question. I think there's a lot to unpack here. I think around accountability, one thing I've noticed is like speaking up is great. Social media has helped a lot. Like I think everyone's noticed over the past couple months, like people are really critical on platforms like Twitter about what companies are doing, whether they're putting their money where their mouth is and things like that. I do think like performative activism isn't good. Like just you posting a black square isn't going to do anything, right? You have to change your internal processes. I think one thing I've noticed is that companies love to put the blame on, I guess, their inbound. They always say like, oh, it's a pipeline problem. Like I'd love to hire minorities. They're just not applying. But I just don't think that's true. So I think hiring for diversity, I think we have to flip the narrative on it, right? We can't consider it charity work. Like I'm putting quotes up, but I think we have to completely flip the narrative on it and put in time and money into researching how to recruit effectively and how to reach these communities, and really put in a lot of thinking and being critical about how the company is currently doing it. I think with crypto, it's interesting and unique because I think so many of these companies and projects are super, super young and super small. Like even just from the survey that we've sent out, we've gotten a couple hundred responses already, but we've noticed that all the companies are between like 5 to 20 people large, other than like some outliers that are bigger. And I think that's why they have maybe less bandwidth or less money to kind of put in time to hire like an actual recruiting team that can put in time and invest their energy solely on this. Like from my experience, a lot of founders end up taking the toll on recruiting, and founders are doing a ton, like 10 million things every day, right? So I think that's something we have to emphasize as a community, like maybe really rethinking how we're recruiting and what we're even looking for. I think a lot of the blockchain space, I think the blockchain space toots its own horn all the time and says we're super meritocratic, like anyone can push open source code, like there's no question of diversity because like, yeah, anyone can get involved. But I think making people understand that that's not the case. It's not as meritocratic as it seems. Like there's a lot of unspoken barriers to even being able to like participate in these projects. I think if you recognize that, if you recognize a problem, that's kind of how you start changing the narrative on all this. But yeah, I think there's a lot in terms of how we can hold companies accountable. I hope the survey helps with that. I hope the study, which we're going to launch Q3, also helps with that and kind of quantifies like what areas of the crypto space we're like lacking in and things like that.
Even when we say these projects are open source, like Medha mentioned, not everyone is able to contribute. It eventually boils down to who do you know. It's all about the network that you have, and which is not the vision of the space. I can specifically talk about what we do at Saya for diversity and making it more equitable. In our hiring process, we are very mindful of how we are wording our job description. We're not adding any barriers in that first step. But not only that, also making an active effort of reaching out to communities, posting those job opportunities, not just within our network, right? That again limits the number of people and the range of people that will apply, but also taking an active effort and going out and reaching out to communities and posting them in these diverse forums is, I think, super critical.
Yeah, a great point, and I'm so happy to hear that Sai is doing that, because I've been able to have the opportunity to speak with several leaders inside the Black community, and a common theme that I'm hearing from them is that the opportunities just haven't been there for that group. And what's happening is through my conversations, I've learned that we have to be active in giving those opportunities. It can't just be like, oh, well, we posted it and nobody saw it. We have to be actively engaging those groups, whether it's minorities or any kind of diversity that we're looking for, to be able to reach out to them and have them understand that this is an opportunity. But then there may be another person, that may be a white person, that applies and they have the same experience or whatever. And companies can't just go to the default and say, oh, because I'm white, I'm going to hire a white person. We have to actively really engage communities of minorities, of women, of the Black community. And I think that's so important. And I'm so happy to hear that Sai is a big part of that.
Yeah, I think it's also a tight feedback loop, right? If you see a company that's 100% homogenous people, you wouldn't want, as a person of a minority or underrepresented group, you wouldn't want to apply to that company. So I've noticed since I joined SciTeam, and I'm not saying we are 100% diverse or we are 100% there yet. We are still making efforts. But since I joined, there's been uptake in number of women applying to positions at Saya. So I think it's also a matter of representation. Having a diverse representation also helps in bringing a diverse set of folks into the company.
Awesome. Now, I want to ask kind of like a broad overarching question here regarding blockchain. What is blockchain? Why is it so special for both of you? And Medha, if you want to start us off here.
Yeah, that is a tough question. I've kind of spent my last 4 years, pretty much my entire adult life, working on the blockchain space and working on different crypto projects. And I think I think I have a couple reasons for why I stuck. One is just like the amazing amount of talent that's in this space. I think that's a huge indicator, for me at least, about the longevity of this space and like the merits of it. You're seeing people from like the top tech companies, from like academia, from like so many different reputed places also joining this space. And that only, I think, accelerates the amount of innovation happening. Another thing is that what I like about it is that there's so much unexplored things to do in this space. Like, I think we haven't even reached the boundaries of the space yet. And I think that's what's fascinating. Like, I guess even speaking from my experience, when I joined in 2016, everything was about like ICOs and all these like tokens and all of those things. And then now that like crypto winter happened and I think all of those were filtered out and some regulation also, now we're seeing other things pop up. So like for the past couple of years, like DeFi has been a big thing. Also like crypto beyond just payments and trading and things like that. So I think that's been super interesting too. I love seeing that. I also love how global it is. I think we can really start seeing the impact of this technology in different communities. So I can speak to like my full-time job. I work on a project called Cello, which is basically trying to increase financial inclusion in the world. So we do a lot of pilots in countries like Argentina and the Philippines, and places where either like the inflation is really high or like the currency is super volatile, and really trying to make an impact in those spaces. Kind of like, I guess if you look at like what M-Pesa did in Kenya, I think blockchain can do a lot of that in a lot of these countries. So seeing beyond the scope of like where I'm from and seeing how it can have a more global benefit is super fascinating to me. And I think the last thing that excites me is also that young people are taken super seriously. Like for example, I know so many people that dropped out of Cal to pursue like their own blockchain company or work on a blockchain project, and their age really didn't matter. I think this space is unique in the sense that like no one really knows more than like a decade's worth of knowledge, right? No one's really like an expert. So I think if you spend like a couple of years focusing on this space and really like knowing your shit, you will be taken seriously. It's not as hierarchical as like traditional tech, in my opinion. So I think you can make a name for yourself and build a brand a lot quicker, and have a lot of impact, which I think is awesome.
Very cool.
Medha covered a lot of the ground, and it's, some of the reason I think all of us are in the space. One being just the wide range of things that you learn just by being in the space, from economics to law. I didn't expect, my background's in the financial industry. I didn't expect coming into the crypto space that I'd be learning about legal implication and regulatory implications, or economics and game theory. Just the wide range of things that you encounter. I think that's super exciting. Also for me specifically, the impact that is made, I think that just makes my day. We work on projects, we do things day in and day out, but even one person coming out and saying that this product that you built, we benefited in so many different ways. It's cheaper, or it's more friendlier, or it's, just more equitable. It's not collecting my data, or a bunch of different reasons why blockchain is amazing. Just having that feedback and the impact and seeing that in real time makes it worthwhile spending all your energy in building something.
So cool.
Yeah.
Go
And
ahead.
another thing is, I feel like everyone is so open to like talking to you and like being a mentor. Like I talked to like amazing people who are literally like PhDs or like CEOs at their companies, or like managing partners at their funds, and they're just super down to just like sit down, get coffee with you, and like talk about why they think blockchain is cool or where they think the space is going. And I think that's something that's just not the case in many other industries. Like people like that aren't as accessible, which I think is awesome. And I think another cool thing is like you're seeing so much traction in the space right now, right? Like for example, Andreessen just opened 2 huge funds specifically around crypto, and they have like a thesis around the blockchain space in general. Like Facebook, PayPal, Square, Robinhood, all of those companies are making crypto teams and crypto projects. I think everyone is super pumped about this space from an external view as well. And I think that energy is super cool. I think bringing everyone together to do research in this space is awesome. And then the last thing I'll say is, I think like I said, there's like so much left to discover. Like just a couple of days ago, I found out about Foundation, which is like a company working on like basically bringing artists together and giving them a fair share of like what they're due and like what art pieces they sell and everything. And that's like a crypto project. There's also like cool projects like Compound and Uniswap and things like that that are helping like the decentralized finance space. And then there's Saya, which is like doing like storage solutions. I think there's like just so many cool niches that have yet to be disrupted by blockchain technology. So I think that's what excites me.
Yeah, I mean, anyone listening to this, I would say what Medha mentioned about the space being really accessible, that's so true. When I started out, and I, like I said, come from a financial background where it's super hierarchical. You would not have, an opportunity to talk to a CEO of a bank if you wanted to, versus in the crypto space, you could just reach out to anyone, and people are mostly open to having conversations. People are excited to onboard new folks. So you are new and you are interested in learning, there's a lot of opportunities.
Definitely. And that's such a good point is we're in this like wide, vast ocean and we don't know where the bottom of the ocean is. And I think that is one of the coolest things is that every day we're kind of discovering and I'm hearing about new projects or new companies working on this and the DeFi. And I guess one of my big questions for you all is I've noticed something over the past 3 or 4 months, and maybe this is because everyone's kind of at home and they're dedicating more time towards this, but are you seeing a trend where the mass adoption is maybe happening a little bit faster than we anticipated, or is this kind of right on track to where it should be in the next few years where we'll start to see some massive projects do some big disruptive things?
I don't think we are still at mass adoption level. A lot of new companies, well-known companies, are coming into the space, and folks in the asset management space, custodian space, have been building the infrastructure to bring in these institutions. And now finally, companies like PayPal, Venmo, Facebook, etc., feel comfortable to dive their feet into the space. But we are, I think, still pretty far from mass adoption. The narrative and the conversation is how crypto will change the world, but I don't think we've seen an application that is as widely adopted by individuals, but you're getting there. It's a slow and steady process.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Mansi. I don't think we're anywhere near mass adoption at all. But I do think there's some interesting discussions to be had around how to get there. I was actually just talking with a couple of friends the other day about, I guess, like weighing these two different sides of crypto. So like, I guess to preface this, like what fascinates me about crypto is like the ideology, right? Like I think a lot of people come in not necessarily just for the tech, but for like the libertarian principles, for like the cypherpunk movement, all that, right? But in my opinion, I think right now we're reaching this point where like the tech is really maturing, and now we're thinking about whether we want to stick to complete true libertarian cypherpunk philosophy versus kind of making potential trade-offs to reach mass adoption. And I think that's been super interesting. I think you see that a lot with like the Bitcoin versus non-Bitcoin community. I think the Bitcoin is super like gung-ho on like keeping everything libertarian, keeping everything transparent and open, versus you're seeing a lot more I guess like discussion around whether that needs to be the case. So I think that's something that's really interesting. I think personally, I think for mass adoption, we have to be less strict. Like as a user, I want the benefits of things like anonymity, privacy, etc. But I also want things like usability, some form of identity, and maybe I can trade off some of my more like some of my freedoms, I guess, to achieve those things. So I think those discussions need to be continually happening so that we can kind of reach the masses and give them what they want.
Yeah. Now, a double question for you here is that worth it to give up some of those freedoms? Because in my opinion, I feel like that is like one of the principles of this whole thing where it's like, I don't want to give up that freedom because that's what the old legacy systems are doing. And my follow-up question to that is when we look at everything as a whole, what is your biggest fear when it comes to the blockchain space evolving over the next couple of years?
Don't think of it as giving up some of these freedoms. I think of it as giving user options, right? There is always going to be space for multiple ways of approaching a particular problem. And, there is a space for truly decentralized, completely private, completely in the hands of users applications. But then I don't think that represents all of the world's population. And then there is space for, on top of these applications, making some trade-offs, but making it easier for these users to use so that, I think the best and ideal scenario would be reaching a state where applications use blockchain without even the user realizing that they're using a certain application or a certain product, and, how the back end works. Similar to internet, right? Not everyone understands how deeply the internet is structured, what the networking layer behind it does, but we use it like any other product. I think that would be the ideal goal.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. I think I absolutely loved how you phrased it, Mansi, like giving the user options. I think that's like the beauty of the blockchain space. I think whether it's worth it or not to make these trade-offs is not really a question for me to answer. I don't know what my opinions on there are. I think that's a really a long conversation. But I do think that's something the space needs to decide and prioritize. I think these conversations are super useful, and hopefully this like plants a seed in people's minds. But I do think that the main thing around all this is education, right? I think the average human, the average person doesn't even know that they should care about things like privacy, right? I think recently with like the advent of things like Siri and like Alexa and all of those things, and just like so much data everywhere and all the apps we use, like even things like TikTok or whatever, I think people are starting to slowly be aware of like how much data they're giving up to a lot of companies and governments. But I do still think that's like in its like infancy. I do think we need to start telling people why they should care about things like this. So I think we should start there for reaching mass adoption. I think right now the people who like care about these things are very little, which is why the space is so small right now. But I think once people start realizing that they don't need to give up privacy, they don't need to give up these freedoms to be able to take part in their financial ecosystems, they'll start realizing the benefits of things like crypto.
While I, totally agree with what Medha has said about, educating people about privacy, why it's important, I also feel in terms of product that shouldn't be a fiction. And we recently wrote an article about this, marketing as surveillance. And what we've noticed, talking to users and talking to people who use products, if you add additional friction, people are always going to go for convenience, even if it, encroaches their privacy. So we need to be mindful of building this into the product such that it's not, additional things that they have to do, and just make it a norm. That privacy is something that is a norm in any product that you use. It shouldn't be a question of whether a product has to have privacy features. It just should become a norm.
Yeah. I guess one of my biggest fears when it comes to blockchain is centralization of projects, whether that be, exchanges controlling a vast majority of things, or miners controlling the back end of projects. And I guess when it comes to the evolution of blockchain, what is some of your fears, like directly surrounding that topic?
I totally, understand the fear behind exchanges controlling most of our decentralized money that's supposed to be controlled by individuals. But I think there are ways to go around that, like something called as proof of funds, where exchanges have more transparency whether they are holding the funds or not, which is not possible in the traditional finance way, right? I don't think that we would see a world where everyone would control their own money, where everyone would use these decentralized products as they're supposed to. We just have to find out, as these, so somewhat centralized entities keep popping up, we have to find out ways to make them responsible and make them transparent. But that's my opinion.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I think Monty covered a lot of my takes as well. I think my one of my biggest fears is like around regulation. I think regulation has obviously been super slow just because governments just don't have the expertise to understand how the technology works. And I think this lack of education can get really scary because they'll have a misunderstanding around how the technology works, and then I guess just like ban it. Like for example, in India, they like completely banned cryptocurrencies for a while, and then very recently they lifted that ban. But that's scary, right? That will completely stagnate and stop any sort of innovation happening in a place like that. So that's one of my biggest fears. And also another big fear is just like people thinking it's a bubble in terms of like mass adoption. Like it only came to people's like the forefront of people's mind when Bitcoin reached like 20K, right? I'd hope that like people are in this space to see it through for the long run and aren't just like kind of riding on the hype train. But I'm honestly really bullish on this ecosystem. I think even just over like the past year, I've seen so many cool projects pop up, so much money going into this space still. And even just if you look at like all the crypto companies that are hiring during COVID, that like blows my mind. Like yeah, like there's so many jobs in this space right now in a time where job security is not super, it's to be taken for granted, right? Like I think we're in situation right now where like the global economy is it's at a scary place. And I think what's exciting about crypto is that it's still chugging along, and I think it is poised to kind of change the way people look at finances and I think their governance technologies.
Very awesome points. Ladies, that is all the questions that I have. Where can people go to find out more information about you, Medha and Manasi?
Yeah, so for She256, I would highly recommend checking out our website. It has everything on it, she256.org, O-R-G. And then if you ever have questions specifically about any of the work that I've done, feel free to DM me on Twitter. My DMs are always open. I'd love to hear from you guys. And if you want to check out the guide that Manasi and I made, it's at she256.org/guide, and it's also on her website, which she can talk about.
Yeah. For Women in Blockchain, you can also check out our website, blockchaingirls.org. Also reach out to us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @blockchaingirls. If you want to reach out to me personally, I'm available on Twitter as well at Manasi Vora. And then the guide is available on both our websites. Definitely check it out. It's a great place to get started if you're really interested in learning more about the place.
And real quick, I actually have the guide pulled up, and I'm going to share it on the screen right here, so everyone can see it. So wonderful job with this whole thing. Once again, ladies, like it breaks down everything you could ever want to know. And like there's videos, I guess, that in this as well that you can watch and get educated about. So it's not just reading the document. It highlights things for you. It's just an awesome tool, and I will be sending out to hopefully hundreds and thousands of more people as we get going here. But let me see. Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah. So this is the document right here, and it has everything you could ever ask for. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an absolute pleasure. I wish you all the best of luck, and hopefully we can do this again. This was awesome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. This was so much fun.
Yeah, anytime.